Welcome everyone to the Anti-Discrimination Hackathon. My name is Raisa Ghazi and I'm the founder of Skill Genie, an e-learning platform where you can learn all about equality in the workplace. Today I'm being joined by David and Gerhard. We just listened to both of your presentations. Thank you so much for sharing with us. And we have a few questions for you guys about your presentation. So let me start off with, who is responsible for the unethical or biased information systems which are being used?
It's a difficult question. It's a new technology, so we are learning as we are going, on the one hand. On the other hand, we are, for instance, using, let's call it, legacy data from some of the data sets from the 1960s. So the data was never built to do this. The systems are newly invented and we make mistakes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I fully agree with Gerhard. I think it's very hard to point out a single responsible entity, but what I try to show in my talk is that companies can take some responsibility and you can definitely mitigate some parts of it yourselves. I think other than that, the government also has a role here. For example, through regulation, they can provide us with guidelines. So I think there's a shared responsibility.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So what would you need from the government, if they are involved, to develop bias-free systems?
I think you need two things. First of all, government should be capable of using and understanding the same systems. For they are responsible to check whether, for instance, a company like Randstad does not discriminate. They have inspections for that. And these inspections need to understand what Randstad is doing to be able to control them efficiently. The second part is, just like we have the GDPR now, which greatly improved how privacy is governed and protected, I do think we need some form of anti-discrimination legislation.
Again, I fully agree. So I think it's a bit hard to formulate what we really need, but I think regulation is very important because I think it's good not to leave the responsibility with the companies themselves. I think it's good to kind of have a framework and also indeed know that you could be audited or know that you may want to expose your systems. I think that's very important.
Yeah. Next to bias-free automated processes, what else do we need to eliminate bias and discrimination in recruitment and hiring processes, David?
Okay, so to fully eliminate bias and discrimination, I think that's a huge challenge. But like I said in my talk as well, I think what's very important is to also have the human touch involved. So I think it's very important to inform and train our recruiters, which is something we proactively do at Randstad. And in some cases, I think this human aspect is more important than the technological aspect. Because whether your results come from an algorithmic system or from some other place, I think recognizing bias, being aware of it, is the most important part.
Okay, so it would never be possible for the systems to take over the work of recruiters completely?
So perhaps it could, but not at Randstad. I think we'll always keep the human in the loop and always combine the tech with the human touch.
Okay, thank you. So what can organizations do to gain more insight about whether their automated processes lead to discrimination? Gerhard.
I think in the talk of Anna it was very clear that there are ways to go through the process so that it's more fair. There are ways to look at the algorithms and the data in a way that is less technical and more appealing for debate. And that's the key to everything. We live in a country with a democracy. So discrimination is a societal issue. When people feel discriminated, then there is discrimination. But just doing everything within the boundaries of a company or a government institution or whatever to try and eliminate bias and try and prevent discrimination is half of the work. The other half is that you have to be in touch with the societal debate about bias and discrimination.
Yeah, David.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of things you can do. I mean, you can audit your own processes. You can also work with other companies to see, for example, where different data sets that you may use, where they're from. So there's a lot in the technological sense that you can do to kind of trace data and trace bias. But again, this is something that should come from the company themselves. I mean, you should really make an effort out of it.
We speak about unwanted bias. Just to be clear, we all have bias in our data, but unwanted bias, that's the bias that causes actual problems in society.
Yeah.
And I think that understanding the difference is important.
Thank you. Yeah. And so how can automated processes lead to more bias-free selection and hiring, David?
Well, so I think I've shown a few examples in my talk. So there are small steps you can take to mitigate bias in your regular processes. So I think technically a lot is possible, but I think it's very important when it comes to choosing your approaches to really talk within an organization. So at Randstad, we're also in touch with a lot of different departments. We're talking with the legal people, with risk and audit people, just to get a kind of shared conception of what it is we're trying to achieve. Because bias-free in itself, like Gerhard just mentioned, can be a problematic process. It's really about the choices you want to make in this organization.
Okay, yeah. And so how do you deal with the legislation which prevents you from learning more about bias in technology? Gerhard.
It sounds like the legislation is the problem. Let's be clear, the GDPR is a brilliant piece of legislation. And the GDPR clearly states that you're allowed to use information as long as you can find the reasoning to do that within another law. But our anti-discrimination laws are very old. They are good, but they're not adept to function within a framework like the GDPR places them. And that sometimes makes it difficult. On the other hand, there are some institutions in the Netherlands that are allowed to research things and have a broader space within the GDPR to act. Think of universities, the CBS to some extent as well. And maybe it's in the meantime, before we change all the laws, maybe we can look to new partnerships to facilitate the process. For instance, if Randstad cannot do it, but the University of Amsterdam can, why not co-create?
Yeah. 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 So do you see a role for your organization or yourself in this process?
In terms of determining whether the data is of good enough quality and bias-free, that's certainly something we can do. In terms of giving something a label and saying this is good or this is bad, that we can't do. So we can help governments, our law restricts our service delivery towards governments. We can help governments to take the right steps to start well and to work with good data and fair methods.
Yeah. And what about for you? Do you see a role for yourself or your organization?
Yeah, I'm not so sure if I have a good answer for this question. I do have a slightly different answer to a question you didn't pose, but that's that, for example, these regulations and legislations like GDPR, they can be very helpful in the sense that it really works if you tell a developer, like there are certain rules you have to follow. And for us the same applies, like all our systems, they need to comply to certain rules. They are beyond our freedom, right? So this is just what we have to do, and just making it very explicit is very helpful and important, I think.
So that would be what you think developers and data scientists should also do. They should take it in their own responsibility. Yeah,
well, so I mean, if it's legislation, then by definition they have to do it. And I think that makes it very easy. So then you don't have this kind of soul-searching process where you have to figure out what is it you want to do, because there's just hard constraints. And especially in the IT world, I think this is very helpful to have hard constraints.
Yeah. Then I would like to end with a question. Do you have a final takeaway for the hackathon participants?
Yes, well, my takeaway is they are tackling a technological question within a problem that we haven't been able to solve even when technology wasn't involved. So it's very complex. And I would personally advise them to choose to focus on solving either one or the other. Solve the societal problem or the technical problem. Now the question is that they have is focus on the technical question. So please focus on that and don't stray, because you'll get lost.
Cool. Okay, that's a good insight, I think, for the participants. What about you, David?
So very similar, but I would say most of all have fun, because this is a huge topic, and it's like it's of course it's too big for a hackathon. But the nice thing about hackathons is you get to kind of grab the problem and just work on it, and you'll be forced to kind of make decisions very fast. It'll be very different from a regular development process, and I think you should just cherish that process. I think it can be a lot of fun.
Yeah, so have a lot of fun. Thank you. Well, thank you, David and Gerhard, both for your answers. On the 30th of October, I will be running the workshop Everyone Has Bias, Including You. And before the workshop starts, I would like to ask you to take the test online by Harvard, Implicit Association Test. And this test we've shared with you through email, so you can find out more about your own biases. Good luck with that, and I'll see you at the hackathon.